Mabuhay at isang pagbati sa inyong lahat. I am Mavin David Catbagan, a landscape architect and a graduate student of the University of the Philippines Open University, taking up Masters of ASEAN Studies. And in this video, I will discuss and present the cultural heritage conservation on ASEAN cities, focusing on Bangkok, Jakarta, and Manila. Let us first discuss the evolution of cultural heritage throughout the history. During the Roman occupation of Greece, the Roman emperor wanted to restore Greek art to promote Roman success over Greece and combine the Greek art with Roman art. Then in the Middle Ages, the English went to a grand tour, visiting European historic sites from cities in France and in Italy. Then, due to the aftermath of the Second World War, where historic sites were completely destroyed, there was a convention for the protection of the cultural property in the event of armed conflict that was held in Hague, organized by the International Community of Red Cross. Then the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, had a recommendation on international principles initially applicable to archaeological excavations. Then also under UNESCO, ICOMOS was formed, which was focused on the preservation and conservation of monuments and sites. Then later on, UNESCO decided to broaden the scope of concern, not only focusing on tangible cultural heritage such as architectural sites and archaeological sites, but also to the intangible cultural heritage, which focuses on the visual arts, performing arts, and music, through the Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. Now, let us focus on the three ASEAN cities that were mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, starting off with Bangkok, the capital city of Thailand. The Thai government focused on ancient monuments, palaces, and Buddhist temples, and having less focus on other cultures, such as the vernacular ones, particularly in the local communities. This mindset is brought about the imagined Thai past or Thainess that focused on nation, religion through Buddhism, and king. The following examples are projects wherein this mindset became the guidelines for the national government. The first example is the Ratakonosin Island, wherein the local people are threatened to be displaced and their settlements to be demolished in exchange for an open park which will highlight the temples and palaces which are believed to be of their priority. Second is the controversial Mahakan Fortress, wherein the local communities are being displaced and their settlements being demolished, as seen in the pictures, in exchange for a cleaner tourist spot, as seen in the following pictures. As you can see, here the examples of the existing local community houses prior to the demolition. Now, we shall turn our focus on the next ASEAN city, Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia. Jakarta, which was spelled with the letter D before the Jakarta word, was assigned as a capital city after the Second World War. Then, after the proclamation of independence, Jakarta experienced the urban sprawl as many people have migrated and settled in this capital city. To control this urban sprawl, an implementation of the outline plan of Jakarta under their master plan and a conservation program spearheaded by the former Jakarta governor Ali Sadikin took in place. This diagram shows the population growth from 1619 as Batavia to the 1980s as Jakarta, showing the urban sprawl brought about by the rise of population due to the migration to this city. The following slides are the examples and cases on how the national and the local government has implemented the cultural conservation in Jakarta, Indonesia. First is the National Monument in Jakarta, wherein the historic Proclamation House of Sukarno, wherein independence was proclaimed, was demolished in exchange of the blueprint building where it will house the documents, the hard copies, the plans of the cultural heritage conservation development and urban development. Another cases are related to urban development, wherein historic sites and historic buildings are altered and destroyed in exchange for vehicular circulation and good traffic management. Then there's also controversy regarding the building lists. Such example is the Menteng Theater, which have not made into the list, while those structures which hosted the Asian Games, such as the Bung Karno Sports Complex and the Hotel Indonesia, they became part of the building list, meaning they are priority in terms of conservation. However, there are also success stories, such as the restoration of the former Old City Hall that the Duchess had built and the Metropole Theater that is still standing until now. As one can observe, the implementation of cultural heritage conservation in Jakarta has become inconsistent and there's no firm direction regarding the implementation. Now, we shall turn to our third and last ASEAN city, which is Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Both the local and national government are facing a dilemma, which is to promote culture and to boost economic development. With that, they have devised an approach called the culture oriented economic development, wherein cultural heritage is part of the consideration in any programs regarding economic development. However, this approach is limited to small district and building scales. The culture oriented economic development is based on the UN model, wherein wherein how wherein it presents how culture contributes to the development, wherein it enables more effective development, promotes sustainability, inclusiveness, equity, and diversity, which results in economic benefits and non-monetized benefits such as cultural heritage conservation and promotion of the identity. This diagram shows how limited the scope of cultural heritage conservation in Manila, wherein it is only limited to some of its districts and not Manila as a whole. The following examples of the district of limited scope is the restoration of Intramuros, wherein uh, Intramuros, a wall that was built by the Spaniards for its defense against the enemies, and their buildings which are restored to serve as new functions such as in Intramuros and in Escolta, where they house banks, uh, fast food chains, or even hotels. And lastly, the newly restored Rizal Memorial Coliseum that hosted some of its events when the Philippines hosted the Southeast Asian Games last 2019. From these cases observed, there are areas for consideration to ensure the effectivity of cultural heritage conservation. First, there should be an integrated conservation by consulting the stakeholders. Most cases from Bangkok, Indonesia, and Manila, it's usually at the top-down approach wherein it starts from the government and and then almost forgetting the stakeholders or the local communities. In other words, it should be holistic. It, it's holistic and in-depth, having an in-depth approach. Then cultural heritage should have a firm and consistent consideration. If the if the city or the local government prioritizes cultural heritage above all, then so be it. Then lastly, heritage conservation should be in a large scale, particularly in the scale of the capital cities, which for serve as a gateway for tourists who are entering or exiting the respective nation state. With that, here are the references used in making this presentation. You can refer to this for further reading or for pleasure reading. I hope you have learned something from this presentation. Thank you for taking time listening and watching this presentation.